Well, hello, I'm Janet Morena, the Executive Director of Priests for Life. Welcome to Just Ask Janet. Well, today joining me, of course, is a dear friend of mine and Father Frank Pavones. His name is Kevin Burke, and his lovely wife, Dr. Teresa Burke, founded, along with Kevin, Rachel's Vineyard, which is the largest healing after abortion ministry, not just here in the United States, but worldwide. And of course, Kevin has a great expertise in this arena. And he's here today to share some insights that I think you're going to be very interested in listening to. So stick with us. And Kevin, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Janet. Great to be with you and your listeners.
Well, of course, Kevin, we have had, what should I say, the past year and few months here with this whole pandemic, the lockdown, the mask wearing, this reducing, keeping children just stopping, not even playing with each other. More sports were canceled for children. Playgrounds. I remember seeing, the yellow tape that police put up at a crime scene. I used to see those across all the playgrounds, even, like, heaven forbid, in the fresh air with the masks on, they went into a playground. And all this, I think, this shutdown, when you think about it, wearing a mask, you're only seeing this part of your face all this time. I think that has had pretty much a negative effect on people. And I know you've had some very interesting insights. So share with us a little bit of your insights in the situation.
Sure. In fact, I just had an article come out this week that we've been promoting. And the starting point is to look at the collateral damage associated with the lockdowns. Now, of course, there's reasons why these drastic measures were initially taking place, and we've been trying to learn as we've been going along. But at the same time, we have to measure the impact of the virus, potential impact, particularly among the healthy, and what are the costs to long-term social isolation. One of the things that I saw that really struck me was that the statistics from the Center for Disease Control came out recently. And in 2020, there were close to 100,000 overdose deaths, drug overdose deaths. That's almost 300 a day. That's a record for the history of our country. So It got me thinking, what are the costs? Is this one of the costs of social isolation? Has addiction increased in other ways in our society during this time? And I think we will find out that it has. At the same time, I came across an interesting article by a journalist. His name is Johann Hari. He writes out of Britain, and he spent 4 years. I don't know where he had the funds for this, but he spent 4 years, and he traveled 30,000 miles. He went around the globe, and he wanted to explore the issue of addiction. How does addiction manifest in different cultures, different places? And part of what he came away with was that he did not see the disease model of addiction as the primary focus. He looked at the area of human connection, and he said the biggest predictor of someone having an addiction is if they've had trauma plus social isolation. So he said the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. He said the opposite of addiction is human connection. That was very interesting to me, because one of the things we deal with in Rachel's Vineyard with those who have experienced abortion, and of course you know this, Janet, from your work in founding the Silent No More awareness campaign and hearing so many of the testimonies, is that isn't oftentimes when you hear an abortion story, addiction's part of that story, wouldn't you say, Janet?
Oh, absolutely. So many of the women, especially, will talk about that following that abortion, they felt so traumatized, so hurt, both physically and psychologically, that they began to abuse drugs and alcohol to numb the pain they felt. So, and then before long, they realized they became addicted, to having alcohol or drugs on a regular basis, just to kind of get over the pain of their abortion. So we do know for a fact that addiction is closely tied to that. But, in the very beginning, Kevin, you said something very interesting about the lockdown and the pandemic. you said the effect it had on healthy people, the word healthy. And I think that's the key, that, like, this whole panic about COVID was that, yes, people were dying, but most of the people who were dying from COVID had underlying health issues. They had, name it, heart problems, diabetes, they were overweight, they had lung diseases, chronic lung, like asthma, or, other issues. Those were the people who, yes, they needed to be isolated and locked down. But healthy people who had good, strong immune systems, that was really compromising. Here now you took a very healthy person in good health, you remove them, like you're saying, in isolation from people, and it has, doesn't it, all kinds of psychological effects. I mean, I'm from New York, so we're big on, Italian families in New York. So we hug and kiss and embrace. And now we do the fist bump nonsense, and everyone, there was no touching even for a while there, even not even fist bump. So, this is contrary to our nature as human beings, isn't it, Kevin?
Well, and that's the thing. That's the important thing is leaders have to really balance looking at learning from the sciences it develops, and also looking at the human cost of people not being able to have normal human interactions. That there are consequences. And look, if you're feeling isolated and afraid and alone and scared, and you're otherwise healthy, and you're not getting fresh air, and you're ordering food in, and you're binging on Netflix shows, that's not good for your immune system. Best thing for your immune system is to be out in the fresh air, getting sunlight, not feeling anxious and fearful. Obviously, you're going to avoid, if the virus numbers are high, you're going to avoid going out to a club at 2 a.m. and drinking and being close. There's common sense things you can do, but I think we have to balance our concern about the virus with some of these the cost of these issues. You look at children, for instance. There's been about 300. Johns Hopkins reported, of the 354 deaths from COVID among children, all of them were children who had conditions like leukemia. Now that's tragic and horrible for those families, and it's horrible that the virus, which it looks as now is related to a lab leak in China, and that's a whole nother story, which is disgraceful, and we may have our taxpayer funding may have gone to that, but regardless of those issues that have to be unfold and be investigated. The risk to children is virtually zero. So our response to masking and social isolation of children, we have to look at what are the long-term effects of disrupting children's lives and relationships and potential for future addictive behavior, et cetera, versus whatever the risk we assess of the virus. I know these decisions are not easy for public health officials, and I'm not saying they are. I'm just saying we have to balance and look at this in a broader context and learn as we go along. We can't keep looking at things as we did when we were in the fear mode initially. We have to look, what have we learned in the last year and a half? How do we proceed in a healthy way? And that has repercussions for people who have had abortions as well.
Well, Kevin, I know in addition to addictions, that suicide rates also skyrocketed during the immediate lockdown and immediate months following. And in fact, we had a very tragic case right here, right near our office. And the restaurant we would go to, it's a restaurant nearby. And this restaurant had just opened up post-pandemic, like when they finally allowed restaurants to open. It was owned by a mom, dad, and their son. And they were open maybe 1 week. They probably just got all their food order in from Cisco and everyone else. And suddenly 2 employees came down with COVID. So they had to shut down the whole restaurant now for another 2 weeks, right? Go by isolation. So they were having a meeting to prepare for this reopening. And the son didn't come to the meeting. So the father went by his apartment and he found that he shot himself.
Oh, that's horrible.
Death. It's horrible.
God
Now, he also had some little mental issues going on too. But the point is, the stress of the pandemic pushed him over the edge. And I know I've read a few articles out there that the rate of suicide during this whole lockdown and the first few months following, the suicide rate has really gone up. And wouldn't you say that's another cause of this? It's addiction, suicide, and no one's really kind of talking about the fact that, some of these people were very healthy people who didn't have compromised immune system, but were now pushed into this no touching, no seeing people, isolation, and it affected their state of minds drastically, right?
Absolutely. And, the reasons for a lot of this social isolation, as I understand it, as a layman, not a medical professional, as I understand it, initially they were telling us that you come back from anywhere, you had to wash your hands, you have to be constantly sanitizing. And then we find out over time that it's primarily transmitted by aerosol. In other words, you need to be in close proximity of someone who's coughing, or talking loudly, or emitting particles through their breath and air. That's how it's communicated. It's not primarily communicated because you touch something, as far as I understand. So I mean, some of these stringent requirements about touching and not hugging and all, I really think we need to reassess this stuff and again balance what we need to function, and looking at the risks these things pose to our psychological health. And this is such a difficult thing for those who are at risk, who are elderly. God bless those who are in care communities. This is such a difficult thing because people need human contact or they get sick.
Right.
But on the other hand, you also have to protect them from the virus if they're vulnerable. So that's a particularly difficult thing for people who are trying to negotiate these things and have responsibility and leadership. I do understand these are challenging times in making these, but we have to learn and have a balanced perspective, I think.
Right. Well, a balanced perspective too, Kevin, is really important. I know I just chuckle at these people I see. They're driving in a car all by themselves with a mask on, or they're out riding their bicycle or jogging all by themselves with a mask on. I hate to tell them it's worse for your health to be breathing in your own air so close like that when you're not near another human being. For goodness sakes, take off the mask. It's like some people have forgotten common sense with it all, and I don't know.
But it says I'm afraid.
Right. Yeah,
right?
That's what it is. It's a fear thing has clicked in. That they're, matter of fact, I was just talking recently to Dr. Ray Garundi, and he's on EWTN, famous psychologist, and Dr. Ray said people have become psychologically paralyzed. They're just afraid to venture out again. They're like, I'm going to get the virus, kind of thing. So he said, it has had a real big negative effect on society, and we don't realize. And it's still going to, I'm sure, be studied in months to come. Yes. But Kevin, just to switch gears just a little bit. Sure. Mm-hmm. How have you seen during this whole pandemic, how has that affected, as we know, of course, the abortion industry? They were giving out the abortion pills via mail. They were doing everything possible to still make sure they could kill babies. But over at Rachel's Vineyard, what did you find as now the retreat sites are beginning to open? But was there more of what would you say, a need or a demand for calling the office or emailing, or was there more of a need for, like, oh my gosh, I had an abortion? And I think some of these might have been abortions that maybe didn't happen during the pandemic, but the isolation time allowed them more time to think and process their feelings. So what's your sense of all that?
Well, there's two ways that I would respond to that. One is just as you're saying, Janet, that people going through a period of social isolation, being afraid, maybe having some time, being not so busy, that they start thinking about some things, and maybe they're thinking about, which is always a healthy thing to do once in a while, is that, we're not here forever. At some point, we're going to be held accountable for our lives before a loving God. And sometimes it provides an opportunity for some things to surface, for us to look at things we've been repressing or staying very busy and distracted to ignore. We saw that in Rachel's Vineyard. We saw some folks who were coming forward, and they were for the first time recognizing that this abortion experience is something that they're not at peace about, that they have some guilt and shame about. or they're confused about, and they were interested in learning more about Rachel's Vineyard. So we did see that, and that's kind of a good outcome in a sense from a very bad situation, is that some people really took that time. And initially we had virtual retreats and they were very successful, but now we're back to in-person retreats. The Rachel's Vineyard weekend is a Friday to Sunday program. It's very beautiful and effective spiritual and emotional healing experience for those who have had abortions, men, women, grandparents, anyone associated with an abortion, really. So yeah, we found people, that were more open and interested in learning more about the ministry, and that's been great. And I expect we're going to see an increase in attendance in the weeks and months ahead. For others, unfortunately, they're now going through traumatic experiences of abortion because they may have had a pregnancy during that time, and because of fear associated with the virus, went and got the abortion pills, for instance, which now represent in some areas 85% of all abortions. So they, in a moment of panic with an unplanned pregnancy, they go out and get the pills. And so within this context of fear and lockdowns and all this stuff, they also have this traumatic abortion experience. In the days ahead, we're going to see those people having symptoms and having relationship issues. And so we're going to need to be there for them as well, and introduce healing so that they don't go on to have all the traumatic issues you have if you don't heal that loss. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And of course, Kevin, I know you have written some wonderful books. And what I'd like to do is to delve into one of them right now, which I guess also this can be connected to the lockdown a little bit. It's called Tears of a Fisherman, and it's recovery for men wounded by abortion. Now, in Rachel's Vineyard and in your experience during the lockdown, you think a lot of men now were suddenly not out at work like they normally were, home with the family. And I can't imagine one person Zooming, mom and dad working at their computers, kids Zooming. How do you think all that was affecting? And then the men who have an abortion in their past that they haven't acknowledged yet, haven't sought healing. What kind of dynamic could be going on here?
Well, one of the dynamics could be that it could put them under more stress if they haven't dealt with that area of loss. And let's say they have that abortion experience, or maybe multiple abortions when they were in their teens or maybe young adulthood. And maybe they have an experience of abuse in their past, or maybe they are from a family where there is divorce and that was traumatic, but they never really kind of dealt with the emotions associated with that. This might be a time that the stress of all that stuff will lead to them having some anger issues on the home front, some relationship disturbance with their partner or wife, with their living children. And it's important for counselors and ministers, priests, deacons, when they're counseling couples that may be going through some stress associated with all this, this period of working at home, or maybe even unemployment associated with some of this stuff, part of the symptoms that they might see, some of the relationship issues, there can be an abortion that's aggravating, or can even be the cause of that. And so it would be good for them to read a book like Tears of the Fisherman, because I have a chapter that deals with the issue of abortion and relationships that will help you understand better how abortion impacts couples, and how important it is, and what a blessing healing that loss is for couples as well. I deal with that a lot on my blog and in my articles, and I'll have videos associated with that as well. But there's a real nice chapter in Tears of the Fisherman on that issue.
Well, also too, Kevin, one of the chapters you delve into in Tears of the Fisherman, it's the silence of Adam. Explain to us that title of that chapter and kind of what are you referring to?
Well, when I was first exposed to Rachel's Vineyard, I was learning from the guys who were attending the retreats and hearing their stories. And the more stories I heard from men who were and this would be the majority of men's stories that I heard, their role in the abortion was one of either buying into the cultural message that it's her decision, so you just have to step back, let her make that choice. You don't really have a say in it. Other guys would subtly manipulate her to see abortion as the best option. Other men would say, look, you either have the abortion or I'm leaving. And then there's some guys who are even violent to the women, coercing them in various ways, pressuring them. What I found is those men, when they had an opportunity to tell their story, and now at a different time in their life, being more accountable and repenting of their role in that, there's a lot of shame. And it reminded me of the experience of Adam in the garden. A lot of abortion stories, to me, sounded like the Garden of Eden. Let me tell you why I say that. If we unpack the story, there's a really powerful truth there. When Eve is tempted in the garden, and she's tempted not by a snake, she's tempted by a serpent. A serpent is a symbol of the diabolical, of the satanic. She's being seduced by the satanic, by Satan. And when she's undergoing that temptation, where's Adam? I think it says in scripture he was watching from behind the bush. She gives into the temptation, then she invites Adam into the temptation. But what does Adam not do? Adam doesn't stand between her and the serpent. And as we learn later from Christ, when he redeems our manhood, Adam should have been placing himself between her and that temptation and saying, no, stop it. You're trying to destroy our relationship. You're trying to bring death to our relationship. And he would have rejected that, but he didn't. And worse, when the Lord came down and said to Adam, hey, what happened? All hell was breaking loose. What's going on here? And Adam says, hey, it's her fault. This woman you gave me, she did it. You know, right. I mean, that's such a lame excuse, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it's kind of like, so you're pregnant? I mean, really, like that's what guys say to the girl, you're pregnant? No, we're pregnant, not I'm pregnant. We're pregnant because guess what? I wouldn't be pregnant if you weren't helping it happen, right? I mean, it's that mentality of, oh, not me, it's her, right?
And isn't that response such a powerful thing in a woman's decision?
Yeah,
right?
Amazing.
The response of the guy to the pregnancy is so big, and whether she's going to move to abortion or not.
That's right. I always say to guys, listen, as soon as anybody says to a woman who's pregnant unexpectedly, what are you going to do? Well, that's an abortion-minded question because you're acting like there's a choice in the issue. Oh, are you going to have the baby or not have the baby? What? No, you're pregnant. It might be a little unexpected blessing, but okay, you're a strong woman and we'll stick by you and we'll get through this. All those other responses are just pushing her right down to the abortion mill, I'll tell you, this book, Tears of the Fisherman, brothers and sisters, I highly, highly recommend it. And then, Kevin, I'm just curious, the other chapter I really like is when you talk about male celebrities with abortion laws. Can you give us a little taste of some of those stories?
Yeah, I actually started down this road when I came across an artist who I was a big fan of as a young man, which was Aerosmith, and their lead singer, Steven Tyler. And he came across and reading his biography, which I like to read biographies of musical groups that I've enjoyed in the past. And he talks about his involvement in an abortion when the young lady was 16 or 17, perhaps 18 by the time of the abortion. But he started dating her when she was very young. And it was a later term abortion for various reasons. So it was a saline abortion. He was with her in the hospital in Boston, and he saw the baby come out dead, scarred from the saline. And he said, quote, Jesus, what have I done? And that really struck me that he was that honest. But of course, we know from our work in Rachel's Vineyard and Silent No More, he needed to tell his story. He was part of a traumatic abortion loss. He has a responsibility in that, as does the mother, of course, but she also was very vulnerable, the mother of this child, very vulnerable at that time, and pressured in various ways. I think her responsibility was very limited, as far as I understand it, and much more on Stephen. So that was one of the stories that I talk about in the book. But also Jimmy Connors, the tennis professional. I look at some of his anger issues. Is it related to his abortion experience? I think it might be. And I also look at the drummer for the Eagles, Don Henley, and his involvement with an abortion with Stevie Nicks, who was the lead singer with Fleetwood Mac. So you can read more about all those stories. And they tell there's elements of their stories that are very insightful about abortion laws.
Yeah. Well, brothers and sisters, you can get Kevin's book at prolifeproducts.org. Tears of a Fisherman is a great read for anyone, for guys out there, but I think also for counselors, clergy of the like, because you really need to understand the impact of abortion has on men, not just women, men. And then also, I know, Kevin, you collaborated with your lovely wife, Teresa, and Father Pavone on this book, Rivers of Blood, Oceans of Mercy. And this, of course, is talks about healing a nation deformed and divided by abortion laws. Tell us a little bit about this book.
This book actually steps you back a little from, the other book. You'll be reading stories and looking closely at relationships and things of that nature. This book steps back and looks at when you've had so many abortions, so many people involved with abortion directly, so many politicians, for instance, also directly involved. What is the cost on our families, communities, but even on our nation, on our culture, on our entertainment, on our vulnerabilities as a society? How does this impact us in a larger way? The more we learn about how abortion impacts individuals and relationships, and we apply that to a nation that's had now over close to 65 million abortions. And what I do is I unpack a lot of that, and there's some very interesting chapters that will expand your understanding of why we have to end abortion and why it's so important to bring healing to those who've had the procedure.
That's right. This is a terrific resource, Rivers of Blood, Oceans of Mercy, brothers and sisters. Great book. Again, available at prolifeproducts.org. Both these books are great reads. And you know what it is? It's summertime. People have a little more extra time on your hands. This will really assist you in having a deeper understanding of the impact abortion has really happened here in all society, but especially for people who are in counseling, youth ministers, clergy alike. These books will be real good tools for you. Now the summer's here, a little bit extra time on your hands. Great reads at prolifeproducts.org. Well, Kevin, I really want to thank you once again, as always, for coming on and giving us some new insights. I hope everyone has enjoyed a lot about that. And brothers and sisters, if you're looking for Rachel's Vineyard, their website is totally revamped. It's rachelsvineyard.org. If you're looking for healing after abortion, go to abortionforgiveness.com. Just put in your zip code. You'll see where the nearest Rachel's Vineyard and other healing is right in your own community. And also, too, if you want to read more testimonies about the people who've been hurt from abortion, go to abortiontestimony.com. So, Kevin, thank you for joining me today. God bless.
Thank you.
Well, brothers and sisters, thank you for joining me, too, on Just Ask Janet. And remember, there are some abortions only you can stop, some lives only you can save, and only you can spread the word about healing after abortion. Thank you. And God bless.